Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same episode. For tonight's show, we are doing a bit of a spiritual sequel to last week's episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. Last week, for those of you who didn't tune in, I talked about the first 3 Alien movies, and I was sitting around thinking to myself, what 3 movies could I talk about next week? What's kind of spiritually connected to the Alien franchise in a way? What's a classic 80s sci-fi series that I could spend my time talking about that is definitely related to Alien through some form of connection? Before you think I'm going to be talking about the Predator series, good guess, but no, I actually decided to go with something different. Although it's funny you think it's Predator, because both Predator and the series that we're talking about tonight have the actor Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. If that doesn't give it away, then let me tell you right now, the 3 movies we're talking about tonight are the first 3 Terminator movies. That being The Terminator from 1984, Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991, and Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines from 2003. There is also the connection of the fact with Terminator and Alien that James Cameron directed Aliens, the second Alien movie, and he also directed the first 2 Terminator movies. So it's kind of an interesting inverse of the direction coin there. I don't know what I was trying to get at with that analogy there, but you get the point. There's at least more connection to it than you may think. I mean, both of them involve AI. I think thematically speaking, there's more connection to Alien and Terminator than there is to Alien and Predator. Because then, if we're going to talk about Predator, we'll talk about it next week. I'll put it that way. But we're going to be talking about Terminator this week, because that's what I decided to do. So, after the break, we'll jump into the first Terminator. I'll be back. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at The Terminator from 1984, available to watch now on Tubi. For the basic plot summary of the original Terminator movie, we follow a woman by the name of Sarah Connor, who is targeted by a cyborg assassin from the future for one specific reason. Her son, John Connor, will eventually lead the resistance against the evil machines themselves, the Terminators being controlled by the evil artificial intelligence called Skynet. John Connor is, of course, the son of Sarah Connor, and that makes her a prime target of the Terminator and Skynet itself, so that they can prevent the revolution from ever happening. Alongside the Terminator, who is sent back in time from the future to assassinate Sarah Connor, there is a man by the name of Kyle Reese, a trusted lieutenant of her son John Connor, who is also sent back in time to protect her. Whew, that's kind of a long way of explaining the basic plot summary of the Terminator, wouldn't you say? But it kind of requires it. I will admit that the movie itself is probably the best way for you to understand the basic plot of Terminator if you're not familiar with it at all somehow. If you are unfamiliar with the basic idea surrounding Terminator, I would be very surprised, because Terminator is an absolute classic in every sense of the word. It has been referenced countless amounts of times. I mean, you could say that the second one's referenced more times. I would say the first one's been referenced as much, if not maybe a little bit more. Or maybe a little bit less. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter how much it's been referenced. The point is that it's still an absolute classic. To this day, it holds up. I really like it. And I think it deserves all of the hype that it gets. I think on the one hand, first off, as I said, the plot's very difficult to kind of describe in words, but the movie's biggest strength, in my opinion, is the fact that it's really good at pacing out all of the chunks of information. It kind of lets you digest each thing and then moves on to the next thing within a reasonable amount of time. So you don't get bored and you get the information eventually, but it also doesn't just throw it all at you immediately. It doesn't just throw each and every single thing right in your face. You kind of have to wait for it to get to the point. And by the time you get about halfway through is when you're going to have all of this background context. The reason I read out all that background context is because it's kind of important to know for the second half of the movie. So I think it's not like I'm spoiling anything. More so I'm just giving you enough context to go into it. Not exactly blind, but know enough going in so you're not going in completely blind. I can personally admit that when I went into the original Terminator, I kind of knew everything about the story. I knew the basic idea of it. I had it explained to me, and I still had a really fun time the first time, and I had as much of a fun time the second time around. So knowing all of it is completely fine. You don't really need to worry about spoilers from what I've told you so far. Moving on from that, well, you want to know something that's definitely not a spoiler and something that I really want to voice right here, right now? One thing about Terminator, the series itself, is that it contains my favorite female character in movies to date. And I mean that in terms of franchises. Overall, just the cinema canon, as it's referred to. I don't like using that term because it sounds annoying and pretentious. But the point of the fact is that Sarah Connor is honestly my favorite female character in any movie I have seen. Of course, in the original Terminator, she's kind of a damsel in distress, and she doesn't exactly earn her reputation as being this absolute kick-butt, super strong warrior until the second movie. But just seeing her in the first movie is good enough for me to reaffirm my already kind of pre-established notion that, yes, she is in fact my favorite female character. I could go on and on about it. There's something so good about the actress who plays her, and just something about the way she performs, the way she acts, just all of her dialogue fits right in, and I can understand her personality almost immediately. All of it just works on paper and on the screen in a perfect way. Alongside that, I will say that on paper, the movie itself sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. If I'm being honest with you, the original Terminator is kind of just one very long chase sequence. Which isn't a bad thing. It's more so just a fact of life. That the original Terminator is a long sequence of Sarah Connor being chased by the Terminator, Kyle Reese showing up to help her, and the two of them being in a car driving away from the Terminator. Again, when I explain it like that, it doesn't sound very interesting. But I can guarantee you this much. When I rewatched this movie, I was kind of tuning out all of the chase sequences. All of the times they were in the car, just driving around, I was kind of tuning it out. But I ended up snapping back into the reality, or more so snapping back into the flow of the movie itself, whenever Kyle and Sarah, I almost called Sarah Sile or something like that, and then I just mixed up saying him or her. Point is, I was back in the moment they started talking to each other. They have a really good sense of chemistry. And alongside of that, somebody who doesn't have good chemistry with everybody, because he's not supposed to, is probably the Terminator himself. Arnold Schwarzenegger does a really good job of playing the Terminator. For being a rough and tough bodybuilder type guy, I think the most interesting part is watching how well he's able to manage kind of a more physical performance without saying anything. It sounds kind of like an obvious statement, but it's essentially like watching people, it's watching the filmmakers pick the right person for the right job and then telling him, here's what your job is. We think you'd be perfectly suited for it, right? To be muscular, not really talk, and look menacing. I think he already had that going for him, so they're basically just honing in on that. They're using a persona of a person and molding it into a really good antagonist. I really like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think overall, the original Terminator serves as a really good foundation for the rest of the world, for the rest of the movies. I mean, of course, the next two are the only two we're going to be talking about tonight, but I can kind of understand why this series got to be so big. Of course, it doesn't all come down to the original Terminator, because half of the reason that the movies ever got made in the first place, anything after the first two, is probably the second movie. So when we come back from the break, we'll jump into Terminator 2 Judgment Day. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Terminator 2 Judgment Day from 1991, available to watch now on Pluto TV with ads or to rent from places such as Amazon and YouTube. For the basic plot summary of Terminator 2, we jump ahead 11 years after the events of the original Terminator movie, as we follow a now teenage John Connor. That's right, he's been born and now he's a character in this movie. Essentially, John Connor is targeted by another Terminator sent from the future to kill him, in order to ensure that he will not lead the revolution against Skynet in the future. While he is being pursued by a new Terminator, yet again, he is also joined by an unexpected companion, a reprogrammed Terminator, one programmed directly to help him instead of kill him. This Terminator bears an interesting resemblance to the Terminator from the first movie. Interesting. Maybe it's just an excuse to use Arnold Schwarzenegger again. I think that's what it is. But I am all for it because he did a really good job in the first movie and he does an even better job in the second movie. Because let me tell you right now, Terminator 2 Judgment Day gets a reputation. It is often heralded as being a better movie than the original Terminator. And that is because it is a better movie than the original Terminator. I don't know how clearly I can put it to you. I'm going to be fully honest. I'm keeping it completely honest with you. I liked the original Terminator when I saw it for the first time. I liked it when I saw it for a second time. I liked Judgment Day when I saw it for the first time. And I liked it when I saw it for the second time. In terms of comparison, I probably liked the original Terminator more when I first watched it. Watching it a second time, I maybe didn't like it as much as I used to. Watching Terminator 2 for a second time, massive improvement. Nearly any problem I thought I had with Terminator 2 was fixed upon a rewatch. I enjoyed it so much more. I was like, yeah, no, I get it now. And I've been whining about this before. I've sometimes complained, saying, oh, it's overrated. Oh, it's not as good as the first movie. Oh, I don't think it deserves to be coined as better than the original. But just watching Terminator 2, I was just sitting there going, I don't know what I was on, what was honestly going through my head when I thought up those ideas. I think I was just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. And I honestly don't know why now, because being contrarian goes against even myself in some cases. Let's get into exactly why I think Terminator 2 is better than the original. First off, Sarah Connor goes through a lot more stuff in Terminator 2 than she does in the original Terminator. And like I said, Sarah Connor is my favorite female character. I almost said Terminator instead of Sarah Connor. Wow. Which character's which? Point is, Sarah Connor is my favorite female character. She is one of my favorite movie characters. And I owe all of that affection towards that character to Terminator 2. All of the things she goes through, including dealing with the new Terminator, which is liquid metal, by the way, really cool effects for that, having to deal with the absolute existential monstrosity that is that while being in a mental hospital, and also having to deal with the fact that her son is now traveling around with a Terminator that looks exactly like the one that tried to kill her in the first movie, compounds into her having multiple mental breakdowns that I cannot blame her for. Just seeing her overcome the first one of realizing, hey, there is a Terminator that looks exactly like the other one that is with my son, makes it all the more worth it. That seeing her overcome that initial shock just makes me more attached to Sarah Connor as a character. And that's just the first example. There's the added dynamic of this friendly Terminator. Because, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a really good pick because he's really good at portraying the physical aspects of it. But with his very thick accent, I'm going to be fully honest with you, he sounds kind of robotic, or he can pull off the robotic feel a lot better because it doesn't sound like an English accent. By that I mean it doesn't sound American. So in an American action movie, it sounds out of place by default. I'm trying to say it in the nicest way I possibly can, but I'm trying to say that Arnold Schwarzenegger has an accent that really kind of contrasts well with all of the other characters' extreme American accents. So I can kind of single him out as the robot. So anytime he's talking with the young John Connor, it really works back and forth where you go, this is just a kid talking to a robot. This is a boy and his dog story, except it's a boy and his Terminator. Not even a boy and his robot, a boy and his Terminator, quite literally. And because of that, their bond feels extremely interesting and fun to watch grow, but also by effect kind of feels a bit stronger. Again, there's a reason why boy and his dog is a trope. I suppose it has something to do with the fact that just watching a young kid bond with anything that isn't a human can kind of be heartwarming. Seeing a kid essentially teach something else how to be human because they have such a pure experience of what it means to be a human being is really fun to watch on screen. That's the best way I could kind of describe it. And I've kind of just come up with that, but it fits perfectly with Judgment Day. Let me tell you, I do not regret saying anything I just said. I think it fits exactly what I'm trying to tell you about John Connor and the Terminator's relationship. I will also say that Judgment Day is a really good expansion of the world. It gives us a better understanding of what Judgment Day looks like, how it's impacted Sarah Connor. Again, Judgment Day is something that will happen in the future, wherein humanity will lose to Skynet, the Terminators, and will be plunged into darkness, and will then lead to John Connor becoming the leader of the Resistance. It's called Judgment Day for a reason. It focuses around that idea pretty heavily. And seeing how it affects Sarah Connor, again, makes me like her so much more to see her have to struggle through that. The only thing, aside from all of my praise, that I have to point out about Terminator 2, and it's very petty, the only thing that detracts from Terminator 2 for me is John Connor. Now, let me narrow this down. And I've said it before, I will say it again. It has not changed between watching it for the first time and watching it for a second time. John Connor, the character, is well written. He's good. He's got the balance of the Terminator and his mother. There's a really good idea there. The actor does a really good job of portraying that idea. The things he says and the ways he says them can work a good majority of the time. But the fact that John Connor is a prepubescent teen and can kind of scream like his voice is cracking is not always the most fun thing to listen to, and is kind of grating sometimes. I'll say it, I find it kind of annoying. It's unavoidable, which makes it more annoying. I don't like listening to voice cracks. Is that so wrong? Is that so wrong to say, I just don't like listening to kids having a voice crack? Is that so wrong to say? I don't really know. But what I do know is that it'll probably be the most controversial thing I have to say tonight. Which is interesting considering the next movie that on our watch list tonight can't really have anything controversial said about it. Because I feel like nothing has really been said about it. When we come back from the break, we'll jump into Terminator 3. Which I'm very interested to talk about, so stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines from 2003. Available to watch, nowhere? I checked really quickly, and it seems like it is unavailable to watch on any streaming platforms. Interesting. I did at least see that there is a DVD copy available on Amazon, so that's something at least, but it wasn't available on Prime Video to rent, or even on YouTube to rent. On Prime Video, it said it wasn't available in your location, which didn't make sense. I'm in the United States. Anyways, interesting. Well, with that out of the way, let's move on to the plot summary of Terminator 3, shall we? For the basic plot, we follow a now adult John Connor, who is about 25 according to the basics of it. They never really say how old he actually is, but an adult John Connor is targeted by an even more dangerous female Terminator called TX. The reason I am laughing is because it is called Terminator, and yet again, we are being targeted by a Terminator. It makes total sense, but it's so funny to say, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. So, as John Connor is targeted by a Terminator by the name of TX, another Terminator comes back from the future, this time again played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, that is sent back to protect both John Connor and an old friend of John's, a woman by the name of Kate Brewster, for unspecified reasons at first. I'm going to actually leave it there in terms of the plot summary, because I don't want to give away too much. I don't think a lot of people talk about this movie. I don't think a lot of people remember this movie. As a matter of fact, I want to say Terminator 3, it happened. Or did it? That's the way I'd kind of frame the basic tagline of Terminator 3, that it happened, but basically anyone is probably unconvinced. I was unconvinced at first. I was actually fully convinced to myself that Terminator 3 never happened. They went straight to Salvation. There wasn't a third movie. Terminator Salvation was the third movie. So imagine my surprise looking into it and going, hey, wait a minute. There is a third movie. Interesting. Let's sit down and watch it. Is it any good? Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, of the wonderful listening audience. I almost said listening audience. Terminator 3 is not better than Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And it is not leagues better than the original Terminator from 1984. But Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is so much better than I was expecting it to be. I was hoping it would be kind of just a fun little romp, kind of an expansion, maybe, if I'm lucky. Maybe it would be kind of just a fun little throwaway movie. What I ended up getting was an actually substantially worthwhile movie to watch and go, man, they're actually kind of expanding on it. They're actually doing something new, kind of advancing the formula a little bit. There feels like a merit for this movie existing. It doesn't feel the need to kind of, I suppose, throw out all references to the old movies and start all over again. Or really, it can build off the backbone pretty well. It doesn't really have to go, Terminator 2 ended quite conclusively, so we are kind of just shoehorning in and cashing in on the sequel. No, Terminator 3 is actually a pretty decent movie. And I liked it. I enjoyed my time with it. I think there was a lot to be gained from watching it. And it was very clear to me that even though James Cameron was not involved in Terminator 3, the people who made it were very familiar with the style that Cameron went with for the first two movies, and the filmmakers themselves overall. Not just James Cameron, of course, because the director isn't the only person involved in the movie. But the point is, they seemed like they were very dedicated to trying to emulate the other Terminator movies in the best way they could. In 2003, nearly like 12 years after the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. When I say events, I mean more so when Terminator 2 was released. Nearly 12 years after the fact, they're still trying to hold on to it, not just for nostalgia purposes, but trying to escalate it. I kind of applaud them for that. And I'm kind of just keeping it vague because half of me doesn't want to spoil this or give you too much details and recommend you go watch it for yourself. But half of me knows I should definitely give you some good examples. So let me give you some really good examples here. First of all, there is actually really good escalating action. The first two movies are really good at keeping their big punches, the big explosions, for later on in the movies. Or more so, if they happen earlier, then later on there's going to be an even bigger explosion. Terminator 3 keeps up that pattern really well. In fact, there was a moment about halfway through where I was like, whoa, that sequence really got to me. I won't even say what it is, but there was a really good action sequence in there somewhere. And it was like, This is on the same level of Terminator 2's iconic semi-truck chase on the motorcycle. Alongside of that, the story that Terminator 3 tells has some actually interesting twists to it. I was sitting back, pausing, going back in my seat going, what? That's what you're doing with this? I'm not complaining. I'm surprised. I'm legitimately surprised that there's merit to that. That you're actually trying something with this and you're adding to this. You're not just throwing it out there. You're kind of explaining it. And it's not great at providing you all the reasons, but the last two movies were good enough foundation. You don't really need all of the foundation in Terminator 3. They're kind of just reveling in the stuff they already have to work off of and going off of that and just kind of adding new stuff and going, hey, let's let you marinate in this for a second. How about you figure it out? That could be seen as a weakness, but for the last couple of weeks, I've had to deal with talking about third movies such as Matrix Revolutions or Alien 3 that give me nothing or what I don't like what they give me. In terms of Terminator 3, I liked what they gave me, and I felt like what they gave me had value. So I was welcoming the change. I will also say that Arnold still does a really good job. I will also mention that despite my praises, Terminator 3, the last act, isn't perfect, but I mean, that doesn't really matter. Because for the first half, I was in. I was engaged. And they did actually have Arnold Schwarzenegger back. Thank goodness. Again, they needed to have him back. I would actually recommend it on the very basis of it could have been worse, and it's a lot better than I thought it would be. Again, after my long streak of watching third movies and going, this sucks, it was so refreshing to finally sit down and go, you know what? This was decent. This was good. I liked this. I'd recommend it. So we're ending on a positive note tonight for the first time in a couple weeks. And I consider that a welcome change. Now then, thank you. Wow. Thank you for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays this week. I will be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg to do another episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. If you're interested in keeping up with the show, please follow along at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, on both Instagram and YouTube. So, with all that being said, I will be back next Wednesday where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.